Good afternoon and welcome to this episode of Your Property Business. It's the podcast that speaks to property experts in the industry so you can learn how to improve your property business. So today I'm delighted to introduce you to Tristan Gordon, and Tristan's got a long CV of accomplishments, but among other things, Tristan is a landlord, investor, speaker, a property developer, and has won multiple awards, including being nominated 3 times for the Property Investor Awards and won the Property Graduate. So a lot of things to Tristan's bow, and I'm delighted to welcome him to the stage so we can learn a bit more about him. Hi Tristan, you all right?
Hey Chris, thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Thanks for coming on. So it does feel rather like half an hour is not going to be long enough, but I think we can whet people's appetites sufficiently. And obviously on the scroll at the bottom, there's your details if people want to get in touch, quiz you more about what you do, how you do it, all this kind of stuff. So thanks for coming, Tristan. My first question is just if you can set the scene a bit, if that's okay. How have you got here? In your elevator pitch, what has brought you to this point? If you talk me through the series of events that led you here, that would be fantastic.
So as Chris, you know, I can talk forever about anything. So to try and keep that to a tiny little bit, it's going to take a little bit of effort. Yeah. So to give you an idea, I started off with as a water ski instructor, met a great chap. But everyone who came on holiday, they always used to work in property, or they were a landlord, or they did done quite a lot of business and managed to do quite well for themselves. And I was chatting, and there's a chap called Alex, really still quite a good friend of mine, and he'd come out on holiday, and we got on like a house on fire. And the next thing I know, I was doing leaflets for him, popping around his properties in Southampton and trying to persuade him to the beautiful place of Portsmouth for investment. So a few years down the line, he dragged me in, and I ended up working for him and started as a marketing manager and then the investment manager. And along the way, you start seeing other people and other landlords who've done just about all right for themselves. And I started thinking, there might be something in this. Yeah. And he kept on nagging. And he's just, I say nagging politely, but he kept saying, when are you going to buy a property? When are you going to buy a property? And it's really hard when you've got someone keep saying, when are you going to buy a property, not to do it. So in probably about 2014, I picked up my first property in Southampton. Then just after I moved up to London, bought another place over in Portsmouth. And then from there, I then started working for a rent-to-rent operator. And we took them from 6 houses to 28 in the space of 12 months. And it was just at the point in time when most people didn't quite really know what rent-to-rent was. So we were telling everyone it was a corporate let, and we were going to be taking on as our own tenant. And that kind of worked really quite well, and we grew that out quite quickly. And then from there, I then moved to a ground rent investor. And what we were doing was doing a lot of direct-to-vendor marketing. And the whole idea was we're trying to find properties that weren't on the market for sale, and how on earth we can get in touch with them to find people who might want to sell a property. So we kind of started using those. As we're doing it, we're using all kind of creative property investment strategies. So we would do an exchange with a delayed completion, and in doing so, we could then back-to-back, so you could basically sell a property that you didn't own to someone else. And we would use options to lock other buyers out. And we're doing a lot of trading as well. So we're buying stuff at below market value and then putting it straight into auction. And this kind of all got my brain whirring and thinking, well, there's got to be something else to this. I've gone off and bought properties in Southampton and Portsmouth, kind of like the traditional buy-to-let route. You put your deposit down, you wait a few years, it's gone up in value, we'll go buy another. And then I sat there and realised, come on, there's something else to it. And to be fair, Chris, that's where I started going to PIN events when I was in London. And I went to PIN in Clapham a couple of times, went to a few of the progressive events, and popped off to a few of the central London events as well, one which I was just presenting at yesterday. And from there, you kind of sat there and thought, well, okay, other people can make this work. And I picked up the book Property Magic and thought, well, there's something a little magic going on. There's something going on in the background here. And what can we do and how can we utilize that to then go from working from someone else to working for yourself and having the pleasure of being stressed and, and choosing your own holidays and when you want to relax and, getting tenants could try and call you to sort stuff out when you've got someone to look after the property. But hey, there you go. That's a little bit of a taster and probably more than you wanted.
No, that's absolutely perfect. I'm just trying to keep up with that. So it was Alex, so like a pretty influential fella, And was that Alex throughout? Was that a different person with the 6 to 28 houses? Was that someone different?
So Alex, when I was in Southampton, daftly, I managed to get I describe it as my drink drive certificate. So having tried to negotiate and get a builder down on price, we popped to the pub, and pubs are great places where builders love to go. Got there, we had a lovely 2 pints, and then it had one too many. And needless to say, I ended up cycling around to all the projects on my bike. And when it came to letting season, I said to Alex, I don't think you've got a tandem bike long enough for me to be able to do student viewing. So do you have anything else we can do? And just at that time, he was just starting living London and we were doing stuff all in Putney, Clapham, Balham, Fulham. And then I kind of swapped and moved up there. And London was great fun being it, but you can just jump on
the train. And that was with Alex?
Yeah, and that was still with Alex.
Okay, fantastic. So the observations I got from that, the two things that kind of resonate with me a little bit, is that if you put yourself in the circle, it sounds like you put yourself in amongst people, or in this case, Alex. And I think you get taken along for the ride. And I've had examples of that. Put yourself in a circle, deliberately or not, you just end up doing what they do. So put yourself in the right circle would be one of my observations there. And it seems like you've got educated kind of by experience. You've just gone out there and done it. Read books and educate along the way, but largely just get stuck in. It seems to be one of the mottos that you work by, which works really well.
But for other people, lots of people learn differently. But one of the main bits I've done, and we were chatting about it, we've chatted about it before, but how I've done a whole load of content on YouTube. But it's actually, I've gone on there and it's like, well, what don't I know? What can I find out? And there's so much information out there now. And I was looking originally, I was thinking, well, what I'd like to do is flip properties. And then as I can flip them, I can generate pots of cash to then put into my own stuff. And I found this lady called Susanna Cole. And actually, one of the bits was when I moved to London, she'd had a training course all online that I downloaded to my phone. And every time you're commuting anywhere, you could just plug in and listen to her weekend training courses.
Yeah.
And that just really filled in those little gaps that I had picked up along the way.
The other thing I'm sort of getting here from you is the passion, the commitment, I think. So I think often I find people would like to do something with property, maybe, and it might be something I'd like to try because maybe my parents or I know a friend who's done it. And I think that gets you so far, but committing to something, I think it seems to me to be the secret sauce of what's going on here. Telling yourself you're going to do it and making something happen. So we're explaining that.
Sorry, I was going to say exactly on that note, one of the things I did a few years ago, and I'm just about to make a new one, it's just putting a vision board together. And some people look at it and think it's a whole load of mumbo jumbo, but actually, when you've got someone, whether it's yourself or someone else, if you've got something to look at and you can think, that's what I want to have, or that's where I want to be, it's a little bit of a reminder to suggest, like, whether you're thinking you're doing property part-time or it's a side hustle and you're picking up one property here, one property there, you look at it. And if you've got that, there's a little reminder constantly of what you want to achieve and where you roughly want to go. Because otherwise it's so easy. And I've seen it quite a few times where people have got the kind of like the get up, the go, they're pushing through and they can't quite find their first deal. And the first deal is always the hardest one. But if you've got something set there, with a picture and in your head, like, that's what I want, then you're going to consistently get up and want to go and achieve it. And otherwise, you just end up kind of losing it and you're thinking, I've seen people turn up to networking events for like a year and a half, and unfortunately haven't got anywhere, but it's actually paralysis by endless analysis, and they haven't just taken that leap.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that. I think a vision board is really powerful way to do it. I'm getting some coaching at the moment, and the coach is telling me exactly that. It's about telling your subconscious that what you want, and having that visual constantly, I think, is a really important part of that. I agree. So you did all these strategies pretty quickly and fairly early on, I would say, and you obviously have your own business now. How did you decide what your business was going to look like? Because you could have done quite a few things within that, and you've plumped for a certain type of business. Just how did you how did you kind of decide? Just tell me a bit about the business first, and then we'll sort of how you got to that point. What is your business as it stands today?
So Zebra Invest is a property investment and development business. And it's all evolved really from one core idea, and that core idea has evolved, but just grown in scale in what we're doing. And initially, and I've always looked to try and I describe a positive impact, because as soon as you ever talk to anyone about property, they were like, well, landlords, they're scum of the earth. And it's like, well, if they don't exist, where are some people going to live? And I sympathize with some people where they see someone buying up family homes or properties that otherwise wouldn't have been, may have been on the sales market, gone somewhere else, but actually they bought a family home for a family that can't necessarily afford to buy it, are going to rent it. But in my case, I always try to look at stuff to have a positive impact. And the idea being that if I can buy an empty property, or a property that's sat there on the market for a long time, or it's something where it's got structural issues or a real reason why no one can use it, and you can put it back into use, then you're having a positive impact. And to give you an idea, there's been properties where I bought one on Ashtree Road, and the whole property actually had an asbestos roof. And the previous owner had put another roof straight over the top of it, which isn't quite good enough. So we then stripped the whole roof off, put another roof over the top of it. And then internally, we then reconfigured it so it had a nice open plan living space. And the garden had so much rubbish in it. You just wouldn't have ever been able to live there. And there was poo smeared on the wall and everything else. But I then bought, on the flip side, I bought student HMOs where actually the students have all left. They've all actually, just after COVID, they've ended up going back to Greece. The whole place is still full of stuff they've left behind and couldn't take with them. But the landlord hasn't cleared the place out. But they've just given it straight to a lettings agent. The lettings agency haven't cleared it or sorted it out, and just no one wanted to live there. So suddenly you can actually take something that's really not wanted and breathe a bit of life back into it. And even when I've turned old one-bedroom flats where you've had someone unfortunately pass away in them, and you've taken everything back out, and no one else would want to buy it or could buy it, and turn it into a really nice two-bedroom house that flat that someone could just move straight into without even having to think about it.
Okay, that does give me a really good sense of kind of why you do what you're doing, and the reason you chose the strategy you've chosen, I suppose. So can you give me an example, maybe in a bit more detail, of the types of projects? I think it's fair to say you've done a few different types of, or different, there's not one cookie cutter. I don't sort of put you in cookie cutter bracket, but I see you kind of as someone who can create options from whatever you're given or whatever you come across. So can you maybe explore a few different types of projects, if you want to call them projects, that you've done, just to explain the kind of the variation of things that you get involved in? The
way I look at it is it's evolution. So when I started my business, I've looked at it and I thought, we're going to do flips on one side. So for those who don't know what a flip is, it's buying a property, doing it up and selling it. It's probably the oldest strategy in the book. There's not one really that anyone trains. Most people turn around and say that if you buy a property, you should keep hold of it, because they are partly right. You have paid a whole load of stamp duty, you've got a whole load of costs, all that time you spent doing the property up, and then just to sell it, you're kind of capitalizing on a small win, but actually the rest of the win is the margin in future. But the thing is, by buying and flipping properties at the beginning, I was only ever looking originally for 1 to 2 beds, short lease flats. And the idea was trying to find stuff where I could see a margin and uplift. But also those size projects are smaller than what most builders want to do. So if a builder's got spare cash and they go down to an auction, it's not the kind of project they want to work on. So I very much focused on that at the beginning. And I also thought it was a good price point for me trying to find investors that kind of wanted to build up that confidence that whilst I've done it for other people before, I can do it for myself. So we started very much with those. And then kind of in the area that I was in, it was a really competitive market. So I then did a lot more direct to vendor stuff. And as I was doing that as well, I was like, well, the stuff I've all done before has always been empty. So let's focus more on empty properties. And so the next property I bought was a 2-bedroom semi-detached house. And it had a extension that was built on paving slabs at the back of it, and all the bricks on the inside of the building, rather than being built on their side like that, they're all built on their side like that, so you could almost touch and bend the walls. So we had to put wall ties in it, And then we ended up using acoustic plasterboard because it's far more rigid to actually help give a bit more stability to the property of all things. Bit of an odd one, but it was one that we did. And so I then I was flipping those properties. And as I was doing those, they were generating small pots, or, generating pots of equity that I was splitting with my investors at the time. And that equity would then spit out some that was money that was help propping up the main business. And it was also then buying and sorting HMOs. So the idea on the other side was I was buying HMOs, which really I wanted to have one strategy that was generating chunks of cash and one that was generating actual, cash flow that you've got as a constant kind of income. So the other side of it was then HMOs. And it's something, obviously, where I'd used to work for this student landlord, I'd done quite a few of them. So I had a rough idea what I was doing. And to be fair, I went off and I did them, and I thought they were really gorgeous properties at the time. And I learned quite a lot of things at that time, which I now don't do, that I've moved across into my current business or the way it's evolved. And so, but I was then buying empty HMOs, usually where they didn't have they were in Article 4 areas, but unfortunately they didn't have planning permission. So I was buying those, sorting out the planning permission, so uplifting the value substantially on the way in. And as we're doing that, I'm then borrowing money from investors on those projects. So then when they refinance, the cash from the flip on one side then replaces the cash that you've got left in from the investor on the other side. So one is working on one side to then fund the other. But you're both doing both in tandem. So then you can start growing your cash flow whilst you're still flipping and generating really nice homes for people. So that was the idea. But unfortunately, not all things will go to plan. And with Johnson Street that I did, unfortunately, we got right in the middle of COVID, got downvalued, the products got changed and swapped out. And what I learned, and definitely a learning for anyone who's listening, is if you ever do look at doing a property deal, try and look at your numbers in the worst case scenario. Have a worst, an okay, and a best case scenario, and don't rely on the best, because if things turn out and things go a little bit pear-shaped, the next thing you know, you could be trying to put an extra 40 grand into a property that you don't have.
I was at a Cambridge PIN meeting yesterday, and one of a COVID story came out again from an investor who was stuck with loads of finance at the wrong time. And I think her point was similar to what you're making there. It's, but be safe potentially. You can do things more predictably and slowly, was her kind of thought process. She put herself in the middle of a very chaotic situation. Who knew COVID was going to happen? But I guess something like that could happen. And she was caught out ultimately. But she's a really good high performer on the PIN circuit, and credit to her and her kind of team that weathered that storm, learned from it, and still going. So I think resilience as part of an investor is one of the strengths you have to have.
Consistency and persistency, endless persistence.
Yeah, totally. No, it's really good story there. So just to summarize where we've got to, and the other observation I've got there, Tristan, is that I think people ask the question, what's your strategy? And I think sometimes that's the wrong question, or at least it's misinterpreted, because the strategy presumably is to, if you break down your strategy, create a positive impact through property investment might be your strategy, but your toolbox of things that you can do, you can flip stuff, you can delay completion, empty houses, one beds, whatever the strategy might be to achieve that goal. And I think that's really important to bring to the listener's attention, is that you kind of need to know a bit of everything, because if all you have is a hammer, everything will look like a nail. So make sure that you know what options you have. And I think what you have done.
The one thing for anyone who's at the beginning of their journey and they're trying to work out what next, or even if it's someone who's got a few properties and you're trying to think, okay, well, how can I accelerate this? The best thing to do at the very beginning is literally just know your trade. So like you're saying with a hammer and a nail, but okay, just master it. So, all right, next time I go to an HMO, okay, can I quickly work out roughly how I can rearrange this property to, say, achieve all en suites? Or, okay, when I go into this property, how can I find some lost space? And one of the things, we tap all of every time I go around a viewing, I tap all the walls. And at King Street that we did, as we were tapping one of the walls, we could just hear it went hollow, and then it went solid. And so we're like, well, what's going on here? And we actually managed to find roughly about an extra, I think probably about 6 or 7 square meters of space that was worth £3,000 a square meter. So suddenly we got about 18 to 21,000 pound of uplift through knocking the walls. But the point being is actually it just comes down to, if you get really good at doing HMOs, whilst there might be other people in your niche, you will be really easy to know exactly which one of those properties works and which one's going to stack. And then as you do that, you then realize, okay, well, I know this about HMOs. Well, what about this also works for, say, doing an Airbnb? And the answer is actually, the difference for an Airbnb is probably they want more living space, they want more communal space, they want things to feel a bit more touchy-feely. When you go in, you want to feel that it's really nice, homely place. And an HMO still needs to feel homely, still needs to be a really beautiful space. But instead, in the bedrooms, you might put in a hanging rail, and then you put in a nice vanity table rather than a desk. But you've still, it's just, you're then starting with one skill set you've nailed and then moving it across, rather than, I see quite a lot of people who, and I've definitely done it. You get the shiny penny syndrome. You're like, shit, we could just do this. We could just do that. We could jump into loads of things. I was like, well, no, actually, get good at one bit. And I think, if you think from what I said at the beginning, is even when I was doing one beds to two beds, the main principle was there was learning how to reconfigure a space. And then the reconfiguring the space I learned there is an exact skill that goes straight across to being able to do an HMO, because then you're able to work out how to rearrange and get those get the en suites in. And then from there, you've then got your information about HMOs, and now you might turn and say, okay, well, I know how to do flats, I know how to do an HMO. Well, what do I need to learn? Or I don't have the money for this right now. Okay, well, we go to, we head off to Chris's PIN networking event, and we sit down, we get chatting to people. And someone says, well, actually, I'd be open to a joint venture. And for anyone who's listening, I was on Chris's PIN networking meetings online. And that's where I've ended up meeting a chap called Jimmy and a chap called Matt. And through those, we've now got about 5 properties together. So again, it's little things all pieced together, and you don't necessarily think, I'm just going to do this. Other windows might open, but focus on one thing, get good at it, and then evolve it.
And it's another example, I think, Tristan, of putting yourself into the circles, because you just those circles will take you somewhere else. So thanks for that. So I'm just going to sort of bring us a little bit more into sort of now. Can you tell me a bit about the things that you're doing now, and maybe step into the future a little bit about where those things might want to take you and your business going forward? And then we'll talk a bit about what you can offer people and how you might be able to help them.
Yeah, right. So with it, as I said, the business has evolved, and you take it, for example, I'll explain one project I did last year, and then that'll kind of explain how we got into what we're doing now. So what I did was I found and I searched for freehold flats. And freehold flats, for anyone who lives in England, tend not to exist. And if they do exist, a valuer is going to hate it, because it's a really difficult thing for them to value and to understand. We usually have properties that are freehold with a lease. So I found these, I ended up getting in touch with someone, building a half-decent contact, and I ended up buying 5 flats without planning permission for about £300,000. And they were in Norwich. So if anyone knows Norwich, they'll realise that a one-bedroom flat is worth anything probably about on the very bottom end of it, 100 to probably 120, and a 2-bedroom flat is probably worth anything between 150 and 180. So we've got quite a deal. But it quickly made me realize, I was like, well, I can buy one deal and I have effectively got 5 in one go. And I was like, well, the principles were exactly the same as my HMO. I knew how to get a lawful development certificate from my HMO to make sure I got planning permission in Article 4 area. The exact same information was required for that. So then it got me thinking, okay, well, if we're looking to do deals where you can try and end up with as little cash left in as possible, how can I do that? And then that's where I've kind of looked at more of the development side. So to give you an idea, one project that we've just done this year, and it's the one that I've got in for Property Investors Awards, and fingers crossed we get an award at the end of this one. But with the deal, we bought a kebab shop and a restaurant, and the restaurant had a flat above it. And with the flat above it, weirdly, part of it was supposed to be dining space for guests. but there's no way in heck you're going to ever get anyone up there, and they hadn't been used like that for 10 years. But the same principle applied. I used the lawful development certificate I learned from doing an HMO, which I've now learned how to do in my commercial property, which to establish planning on a property I bought the year before, to then be able to confirm that I've got a 3-bedroom flat. And so I'm just using those steps. So then with the property, we ended up converting the back of it into a 6-bedroom student HMO. We've got the front downstairs now as a micro pub.
Okay.
So fingers crossed they're going to enjoy it. And then we've got next door, we've got the kebab shop. So the kebab shop we're looking to convert hopefully into a 2-bedroom Airbnb, which should be pretty good. And again, that's tapping into, as I said earlier, is I know how to do an HMO. So an Airbnb is not going to be that much of a step. And if you then call up the right people and you speak to someone like Liam from Ginger and Gold or Tom Pryor, and you have a word with them and see roughly what they want and what they expect from the property, and you've only got to look online to see what other people are doing, and then you build out and kiss out your property like that, then you then pass it over to someone like, if I was to have, we've got properties managed by Chris, and you find an expert who's going to look after the properties. Right? So been doing those. We've got, so King Street is the next project coming up on that side of things. I've got a project just out on Yarmouth Road in Norwich, which is, it was an office. It's being turned into 6 flats. So we should be into 4 3-beds and 2 2-beds. We've done a whole massive cost engineering program on it to try and bring the cost down to develop it. And that has been a massive step up in knowledge and trying to take the steps from what I've done before to then going from kind of your residential properties to doing development. And fortunately, there's quite a lot of information already out there that can help you help you do it and achieve it. And one of the main bits I picked up was a book by a property CEO called Industrial to Residential Conversions. Pretty much followed the process for that. And and we're doing quite well. It's touch wood, it's going to do quite well. And then after this, we've got a property that was agreed a little while ago on Orchard Street. I'm hoping to get 3 2-bedroom houses built there as well. So there's plenty going on.
There isn't there. I'm getting sort of tired listening to it. About absolutely massive. I was going to be a bit bold for my own kind of sort of curiosity. If you put your head 5 to 10 years into the future, what do you see that looking like now? It might be a slightly unfair question, but have you got a sense of, because where you've come from, where you are, is obviously a jump, and who knows what the next decade will hold. But have you got a sense of what you want your business to do for you and what you want it to do?
So I think it's important for anyone, anyone who's got a business, a side hustle or whatever, to sit there and think, well, what do I want to achieve? And and this comes full circle, but one of the bits, I was at your event ages ago, and I said to people, I was like, well, look, if you want to go and achieve something, if you want to get a new car, well, actually, how much is the car worth? Okay, well, then is that, say, doing a flip? Or if you sit there and think, okay, I want to earn an extra £2,000 a month, then I can choose to work. Well, what does that look like? Does that look at like 5 buy-to-lets, 2 HMOs, and trying to work it backwards? So what I've done is, and I've got to update it for this year, for next year, but each year I write a business plan and a strategy of roughly what I want to do and roughly how I'm going to get there. And admittedly, this year hasn't gone as well as I'd like. And I'll say that because interest rates have been high. I've got a couple of flips that have kind of a little bit stuck and they haven't kind of sold. But if you're planting seeds and it's raining, at some point the sun's going to shine and it's going to get growing. So on my wall next to me, and this is why I keep looking to one side, is I have written a breakdown of what I want to be able to achieve it. So one of them was 2 HMOs this year, hopefully, to complete 2 flips. Technically, I've completed 1. Then the idea is then I work with private individual lenders who lend money towards projects. And one of them was to find new investors, new people to work with and qualify them. So then they then work and lend funds towards my projects so I can then go build out and develop projects.
Yeah.
And so I've broken that down roughly, number of lenders, what the average person has lent me before. So how many people I need to meet to then work out how much I need to raise. How many commercial conversion units I'd like to do. And then one of the bits is to do a commercial conversion, you need to be able to get leads coming in. And so my other bit was I would like to retain 2 commercial agents on like a fee basis. So when they have a property that is completely off market, they would come and talk to me. And that was all about, okay, well, you break everything down to what I want to achieve now. So the answer to in 5 to 10 years, I haven't quite got that far on my list of things on the wall, but in my business plan, I had put it to the stage that I wanted to be doing, I think probably about 50 commercial conversions and building units a year. But knowing how stressed I've got this year, I think I'd quite like more work towards picking up opportunities where you've got options for asset management. So if you're picking up commercial properties that have already got other, say, units in the building or areas where you can extend onto the back of them and create value that other people just simply haven't noticed. It's a complete shift again, but that would be really interesting, and also stick with the commercial conversion side of it. But hopefully in 5 years' time, I will be Tristan, CEO of Zebra Invest. So
indeed, I mean, isn't that the goal? Yeah, that sounds amazing. This is touching on your point there about the balance thing. Again, it brings you back to last night's speaker who said she came from what she described as a high performance family. So she was driven to high performance and achieve. And then COVID made her stop. And she admitted that she kind of broke down at that point. And then she was forced to look at her sort of wheel of life and then different quadrants of that. And she was neglecting stuff. I thought it was quite an interesting reflection, that it doesn't always go quite according to plan. And maybe, you go too much in one direction. And we've all got to look at that, I think, our life in the whole, as well as our goals, financial and asset-based goals, different stuff. So I think it's a word for the wise, really. Is
on the flip side of it, I'd quite like at some point to have a family. My girlfriend and I have agreed to buy a house together, so we're back off to have a look at that this afternoon.
Awesome. So don't talk about development in that meeting; just live there.
No. And one of my goals, I've said to you, is about buying a Lotus, and yes. I had agreed to buy a Lotus. Unfortunately, things haven't quite panned out at the moment, but we will have one. So that'll be down the line, and I'd really like to be able to buy and build my own place in Greece. That would be incredible. So, but that's just having an idea or a vision in your head what you'd like to do. And one of the bits that I'd always put in my vision board was to be able to sit down and have lunch with my girlfriend. So be able to take time out of the day and to surprise her, because it's a really nice thing to be able to do, and it's something that not everyone can do. And actually just turning up and say, hey, I'm here, it goes down a long way.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely smashing. We are getting towards the end of our allotted time. There's a few things I'd like to ask you, if that's okay. So which one should we go for first? What sort of things can you offer people? What are the offerings that your business has to give to people? What are you looking for, and what can you offer people?
With Zebra Invest, I've got a few people who I do lend and learn with. So they come into the office, sit down, and we usually spend a few hours or a couple of hours each month together, and then over the space of 12 months, go from start to finish through a project. And the idea being, whether it's going to be something that you're looking to get your first buy-to-let, get an HMO, or you're looking to do something like, buy commercial property, split stuff up. As you kind of touched on, I've managed to do quite a few different interesting ways of weaning stuff together. So whether it's someone who wants to take them something they've already done, or wants a little bit of guidance or pointers along the right way. And so I've had people who've they basically lend towards a project. I sit down and do a free session. They then lend towards a project, and we then spent 12 months together going through it. So that side of it, I've got other people who simply just lend me funds towards projects. And I'd like to think, touch wood, by now I'm a safe bet, and that people can lend money towards projects. And the idea being that I then pay a fixed return on their money over the space of about 12 months or so. And to be fair, that's the main side of it, because and I've had quite a few people ask, well, why don't you just do it on your own without using investors' money? And it's a simple answer to me. To other people might not seem. So if you work with other people, I can go further, because as we've already spoken about, I've got multiple projects on the go. And if it was just with my own cash, I don't need to be able to do so many projects. Whereas if you're working with other people, teaching people, and bringing someone else along for the journey, then you're both going to be winning at the end of the day. And for me, I'm going to be able to go much further than I would have done on my own.
Good answer. No, that's a very clear answer. Thank you. So just to round off, then I'm going to ask a slightly different question I would normally ask, but it's a similar vein. What advice would you give to your younger self? So imagine yourself 5-10 years ago. You know no more than you did then. You know, what sort of things would you tell yourself?
So,
now, so 5 or 10 years, the younger you.
First one off the bat is younger me would have been at this point 24. So as a 24-year-old Tristan, he'd been working for property investors with Alex. He'd been doing refurbs, been doing flips, running quite decent sized projects. But the main bit was probably I had someone next door to a project of mine who was actually in the PIN circuit. She was one of the speakers. And I remember they bought the property next door. And I saw that it said something about PIN. And I thought, oh, what a whole load of hogwash that is. And I was quite closed-minded, and it was almost really almost a little bit arrogant to think, you know, I'm doing this for an investor. I know what I'm doing. And you really do not know what you don't know. And I think the main bit is that you need to stay open to learning. You need to be willing to pick stuff up, need to be able to keep reading, keep going. Because with Tristan then, he was closed off. I'd already bought properties myself and I'd already been working on them. But if I'd simply at that point in time gone along to the PIN network, listened to people, picked up a book, opened my ears and my eyes, where I would be now would be a completely different ballgame.
Wow, good advice. So get out there earlier, network, put yourself in the middle of people you can learn from, I guess. Yeah,
most definitely. And listen, follow up with people, and take people out for beer or coffee.
Good idea. Yeah, we can all do a bit better of that, I think, following up and taking people out for coffee and beer. Well, Tristan, that's absolutely fantastic. There's so much more to talk about there, but I think we probably have to limit it. But thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and I hope everyone got some value out of that. So just to round up, thank you for everyone listening to the podcast, Your Property Business. Please do subscribe to the podcast, and on YouTube you'll see the video. So like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That does help get the messages out there. Thank you very much indeed, and we'll stop the recording there. Thank you very much indeed. Take care.